You know, when you sit down to learn about the origins of the world, whether you're reading a history book, a science textbook, or like an ancient myth, there's almost always this element of force involved.
Oh, absolutely. There's always some sort of explosion.
Right. A spark of friction or this grand architect commanding the universe to just, well, exist out of nothing. But today, we are inviting you to explore something entirely different. Welcome to this deep dive into excerpts from a really profound text known as the Motherbook, a record of remembering.
It's such a beautiful text to unpack.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore this alternative mythology about creation, human nature, and our deep, often forgotten connection to the earth. It is a text that completely bypasses our usual focus on, rules, hierarchy, and punishment.
Yeah, it completely zeroes in on the power of memory, presence, and healing instead.
Exactly. It asks us to look at the foundations of existence not as an act of will or dominance, but as a profound state of being.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the foundational concept of the Mother Book just totally flips the script on how we usually think about creation.
It really does. It's quite a shift.
The text explicitly says, in the beginning, she did not speak creation into existence. She remembered it. And I'm trying to wrap my head around this. I think the best way I can describe it to you listening is, imagine an artist or maybe a novelist.
Okay, I like that.
You know that feeling when a creator doesn't have to painstakingly build a story piece by piece, like struggling with an outline?
Right, where it's just a slog.
Exactly. But instead, they suddenly just see the whole vision. It's entirely vivid, already complete in their mind, almost like they're recalling a lost dream rather than inventing something from scratch.
That is exactly how the Mother Book describes the origin of absolutely everything. And what's fascinating here is the profound shift in perspective that creates.
Because it's not forceful, right? If creation isn't an act of commanding something out of a void, then it is a deep interior act of recognition. The text tells us that the mother recalled the world from within herself.
Wow.
And because of this inward origin, the fundamental forces of the universe are completely recontextualized. Like in the Mother Book, light and dark are not locked in some eternal cosmic battle.
They aren't opposites at all, are they?
Not at all. They're described simply as two faces of the exact same presence. So light is her outward gaze, and dark is her inward pulse.
Just wow, I love that imagery so much. It frames the universe as a breathing organism.
It really does.
The text notes that the waters gathered simply because she gently pressed them together and green things grew just because she opened her hands. There's no strain at all, no exertion or labor.
And that lack of strain, it dictates the nature of human origins in the text as well. Because creation was this inward natural unfolding, the resulting relationships were built on wholeness rather than hierarchy. The Mother Book actually explicitly contrasts itself with other narratives you might be familiar with. It states that woman did not come from man's rib.
Oh, interesting. So what is the dynamic?
Instead, woman is the root, the soil, and the one who carries memory. Man came forth as a younger branch from an older trunk, so together they don't form a ladder or a pyramid or any kind of ranking system.
They form a complete unbroken circle.
Exactly, an unbroken circle.
And because everything is part of this circle, the original state of existence described here is just entirely free of fear.
Total grounding.
Yeah. The text notes that no one feared the dark because the dark was literally just the mother turning inward to rest. And no one feared death either.
Because death wasn't a punishment.
Exactly. It wasn't a punishment for a transgression, and it wasn't a tragic end. It was just a return. The text compares it to a leaf releasing from a branch and drifting naturally back into the ground that made it. It paints this picture of perfect, unbothered harmony.
When you understand yourself as a temporary expression of a permanent cycle, the anxiety of ending simply dissolves.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. I find myself questioning the implications of this perfect harmony.
So it sounds a little too perfect.
Right. If everything was a natural cycle, and if creation was this flawlessly complete thing that was just, remembered into existence, how did things go wrong? I have to push back a little on this idea of a flawless origin.
That's a very fair point.
If the universe was perfectly remembered, doesn't that mean the disruption, the fall, the fracture was remembered too? Or did humanity somehow manage to invent a completely new kind of forgetting?
That is the pivotal question of the text, and the Mother Book addresses it through a concept we can call the shift.
The shift.
Yeah, and it is crucial to understand that in this narrative, things didn't break because of an inherent dark evil or some grand cosmic sin.
So no forbidden fruit.
No, none of that. The shift happened for a very simple, understandable reason. Curiosity just grew faster than remembering.
Wow, so humanity's drive to explore outpaced its capacity to stay grounded?
Precisely. The text explains that a group of people wandered far beyond the known valleys. And as they wandered, an incomplete idea rose up in them.
What was the idea?
They thought, we can shape the world better than it shapes us.
Oof.
Right? And the Motherbook is careful to point out that this idea wasn't malicious. It was just dangerously incomplete.
Because in their drive to shape the world, they forgot the rhythm of the seasons.
Exactly. They forgot the return.
Yeah.
They adopted a mindset of extraction rather than participation.
And the physical consequences of that forgetting were immediate. I mean, the text says they started building walls. They cleared the land without any gratitude, and they began to store and hoard more than they actually needed.
Which completely changed their psychology.
Yeah. Because of those actions, fear moved into the silence where intuition used to live. Just think about modern hustle culture and how we often prioritize rapid growth, endless accumulation, building up our own personal fortresses over any kind of sustainable rhythm.
It's a very modern problem.
We push, and the result is this collective underlying anxiety.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the Motherbook is directly linking the physical actions of these wanderers to their psychological state.
Meaning the hoarding and the clearing.
Yeah, the clearing of the land without gratitude and the hoarding, they aren't just bad ecological practices. Mechanically speaking, when you hoard, you are signaling to your own nervous system that there isn't enough.
Which breeds a constant state of threat.
Exactly. The physical walls they built were just manifestations of the fear that had made a home in their minds. But what is so compelling is how the people back in the old valleys, the ones who hadn't wandered away, became aware of this fracture.
Right, because they didn't get a letter or a messenger explaining what happened. They literally felt it on a sensory level.
Because sensation is the only language the mother has ever used.
Which is wild. The women in the old valleys began to have incredibly tense dreams. One woman dreamed of the moon turning red.
And another dreamed of trees suddenly shedding all their leaves right in the middle of summer.
The imbalance of the wanderers was literally vibrating back to them through the shared network of the earth.
And because they felt this deep structural imbalance, it naturally provoked a response. But they didn't raise an army to go confront the people building walls.
They didn't send politicians or negotiators.
No, they sent presence. Specifically, two women named Aliyah and Saria walked into this restless, paranoid land armed with absolutely nothing but memory.
And the landscape they walked into was deeply unwelcoming, wasn't it?
Oh, incredibly hostile. The Motherbook describes walls rising like teeth. Children were confined to playing in narrow courtyards instead of open grass, and the fields were heavily guarded, as if the earth itself might suddenly attack the people tending it.
So a society functioning entirely on the frequency of self-preservation and paranoia.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate for a second on your behalf listening to this. It is a gorgeous image, but practically speaking.
I know exactly what you're going to ask.
When you are facing down walls that literally look like teeth and dealing with a society paralyzed by deep-seated paranoia, isn't simply being steady a massive, almost naive risk?
It sounds like it.
Like, how exactly does passive presence dismantle physical, heavily guarded walls?
You're entirely right to be skeptical. And honestly, reading it, it does sound like a terrible survival strategy at first glance. But the text draws a very sharp line between passivity and what it calls active alignment.
Active alignment.
Right. Aliyah and Saria were not passively sitting around. They were rigorously holding a frequency of memory and wholeness in an environment that had completely lost it. Think of it like a tuning fork.
Oh, I love that analogy.
If you bring a vibrating tuning fork into a room full of discordant instruments, the steady frequency eventually invites the other strings to harmonize. They were providing a living mirror of what the wanderers had forgotten.
And the text notes that the children approach first because, well, children always sense alignment before adults do. Then the adults start watching, and the embers of memory inside them begin to reignite. Alea says this incredible line. She says, "Truth never needed force. It only needed space."
It's so powerful.
And the people end up taking down their own walls, brick by brick, finally breathing in life instead of fear. The mother whispers, "Where openness returns, I return."
It is a profound sequence, but the text makes it clear that this outward healing, the dismantling of the physical walls, was really just the beginning.
Right.
After the Valley women returned home, the mother spoke again. And this time, she pointed inward. She revealed that the greatest forgetting doesn't begin in the land or in the building of physical
It
walls.
happens internally.
Exactly. The greatest forgetting happens in the quiet, avoided corners of the self. The truths we hold too long in the dark. The love we mistake for protection that slowly hardens into control.
Which leads the travelers to this new landscape called the Sundered Plains. And the Sundered Plains are a place of absolute crushing numbness.
Total detachment.
The text says the people there had felt so much for so long that they just stopped feeling entirely. Their eyes are described as open but unlit, like candles with no flame. They're just mechanically performing the motions of living.
And a character named Rowan asks the critical question here. He says, how do you teach feeling to those who have forgotten what it is?
And Sarir replies, you do not teach, you remind. And reminding begins with presence.
Which is such a shift from how we usually try to fix things.
Right. We see Saria and the others just start living alongside them, doing the most basic, grounding human things. Aurelia sweeps dust from the doorways. Saria sings quietly while she's cooking.
Malin greets people with a warmth they don't even know how to receive anymore.
And Alea walked around literally touching things, walls, grass, people's shoulders, just communicating that something is warm and alive.
We need to look at why these specific tiny actions are the antidote to the Sundered Plains.
Because it seems so small.
It does. But trauma and chronic overwhelm force people out of their bodies. They detach from their physical reality to survive the pain. Sweeping dust, humming a melody, feeling the texture of a stone wall. These are sensory-rich, rhythmic, physical anchors.
So they aren't giving philosophical lectures because philosophy doesn't heal a traumatized nervous system.
Exactly. They are literally pulling the inhabitants' awareness back into their bodies, proving to their biology that the present moment is safe to inhabit again.
So what does this all mean? When I read this section on the Sundered Plains, I couldn't help but think about the modern experience of burnout.
It's incredibly relevant today.
You look at people today who are overwhelmed by constant, compounding crises, a never-ending cycle of bad news on their phones, the pressures of daily life. So many of us develop those unlit candle eyes. We shut down our emotions entirely just to get through the day mechanically.
We literally become the numb people of the Sundered Plains. But sensation returns to them these microscopic, delicate threads.
Right, like a child feels the softness of a blossom.
Or a man feels a sharp warmth in his chest that he can't even name.
And an elder's lips tremble into the ghost of a smile, as if their muscles are struggling to remember how to express joy.
And then there is the climax of this section.
Which is deeply moving. A little girl stands in the center of everyone and just cries, loud, raw, pure tears. And where her tears land, the earth darkens, drinks the water in, and immediately sends up green sprouts.
This brings us to the core underlying mechanics of the Motherbook. This isn't presented as a poetic metaphor. It is an active, quiet law. The land mirrors the people.
Wow.
The earth in this mythology functions as a shared, interconnected nervous system. When human hearts close, the physical soil literally cracks.
When people hoard out of fear, the fields grow brittle.
When trust breaks between neighbors, the river runs slow. But when humans remember, when they open up, when they weep, when they reach toward each other, a world physically responds.
Sprouts emerge, rivers clarify, flowers bloom in patterns that trace the healing of the people.
It isn't magic. As the text insists, it is memory. The land is remembering what the people have forgotten about themselves.
We've seen what happens when humanity completely shuts down its capacity to feel. But the text suggests that feeling too much without grounding can be equally paralyzing.
The exact opposite problem.
Right, which brings us to the Wandering Land. In this place, the people aren't numb at all. They feel everything.
Everything.
But because they feel everything, they cannot choose. They are trapped in this severe spiritual paralysis. The text describes them as being frozen mid-gesture, suspended between beginning and beginning, unable to fully exhale.
The mother gives a fascinating definition of this state. She says that confusion is simply the fog that forms when the heart forgets it is allowed to choose.
Such a brilliant line. And again, the travelers don't argue with them or give them a lecture on decision-making. They just model completion.
Right, they take one step.
They drink from a bowl. They fully open a door. They deliver a message. They start a game.
And beneath them, the earth starts glowing faintly,
Yeah.
signaling yes, yes, yes. Like it's been waiting for someone to prove that motion is safe.
And they find out that this whole paralysis started deep in the central spire of the land. It stemmed from an ancient moment where the people were offered this enormous chance for expansion and evolution, and they rejected it out of fear.
Right.
The mother's lesson here is striking. She says, when you feel the great path, you lose the small ones. But when you accept the great path, every path becomes clear.
It's so true.
It reminds me of the ultimate analysis paralysis. It's like when you sit down, you open up a streaming service and you scroll forever because committing to one single movie feels like you are losing out on all the other options.
Oh, absolutely.
You feel everything, you see all the paths, but you are completely frozen. My question for you is the text basically saying that making any choice, no matter what it is better than making no choice just to break the freeze?
Well, this raises an important question about the nature of action and consequence in the text. The Motherbook isn't necessarily advocating for a reckless choice just for the sake of making a choice.
Right, that would just be chaotic.
Mechanically, what it suggests is that the completion of a cycle, even a tiny mundane cycle, like fully opening a door or finishing a drink, is what signals safety to the human nervous system and to the earth itself.
Because the paralysis in the wandering land wasn't just about not knowing what to do.
No, it was about the terror of consequence. By modeling simple, completed actions, the travelers were reminding the people that action does not equal destruction. Accepting the great path means accepting that you are a living, moving part of a changing world.
Which is terrifying, but necessary.
Exactly. Once you accept your fundamental participation in the universe, the agonizing anxiety over the small paths, the day-to-day choices dissolves because you trust the overarching rhythm.
It's about restoring the flow, completing the circle that we talked about at the very beginning.
Precisely.
The Motherbook, as we've explored, is definitely not your standard creation myth. It isn't a doctrine obsessed with sin or redemption or appeasing a distant god who lives in the clouds and draws maps for us to blindly follow.
No, the text tells us exactly what it is.
Right. It is a record of remembering. It's an exploration of what actually happens when human beings stop being terrified of themselves and of each other.
And it leaves us with a profound, comforting final note about our own nature. We were not formed from clay and commanded to obey. We were remembered into existence because we were always a part of what the mother carried.
That is so beautiful.
As the text whispers through the grass, you were born connected. You only needed to remember.
You only needed to remember. It's such a powerful shift in perspective. We've talked so much today about how the land mirrors the people and how our internal states, whether that's the burnout and numbness of the sundered plains or the frozen panic of the wandering land, literally shape the physical world around us.
They absolutely do.
So I want to leave you with this thought to mull over. Take a look at your own immediate surroundings right now. Look at your workspace. Look around your home. Think about your daily routines. If your environment is a perfect physical mirror of your internal state, what is it trying to remind you of today?
That is a brilliant question to leave on.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.